So these are just sort of conceptual, but these are all the areas of Richardson Bay. And I'll show you some examples from the Coyote Creek. Once again, this is that Manzanita parking lot that you ride off on 101 to head to Stinson Beach. It's probably how most of you know it. And then the Mill Valley shoreline. And so you start looking at sea level rise, and you start laying out a wall or barrier alignments. And one thing you quickly notice is that to capture, say, 50 or so inches of sea level rise, you need a lot of levee, a lot of barrier. So this is one alignment that doesn't, I'll show you in a second, doesn't do anything to mute the tides. And so you have to really end up running barriers, levees. We have a lot of private property. I'm doing another alignment where that one protected the back of people here. This one protects the marsh here. It protects the very, very popular bike trail that runs the old railroad grade. This one is if you were able to put a tide gate in, you really cut the amount of levee down quite a bit, or barrier, and I'll show you that. And I'm circling this because I'm telling you that in 5 years, this is going to be the fight of the bay, which is the idea of can we mute our high tides? Can we do in such a way that we can now mute the impacts of sea level rise like they do quite a bit in Europe, or they're planning to do, but currently can't be done, or is very, very difficult to do in the Bay Area under the current regulatory climate. So I'm previewing, most of you are younger than me, your career if you stay in this in the next few years. This is where I think as the chronic condition gets worse, there's going to be more and more push to get the agencies to improve these sorts of high tide barriers. How they look and how much tide they use is going to be a real issue in the future. So I'm starting to lay out alignments, just running, looking at different sea level rise elevations, and this is starting with the 100-year still water elevation in the bay, and I won't go into much detail on that unless there's questions, and then adding different sea level rise scenarios. And you can quickly start adding up and your wall heights, and then you can start making the wall real for people, which is what I'm trying to do. Thinking this is the start for really making these ideas that have all been concepts more real. And you can see that if you can put it in that one gate, you can cut the miles of barrier down by about 2 miles. So these sorts of decisions and planning will have to be made on the community political level, but I think as engineers and architects, it's our role to sort of lay out what the future looks. And if we're going to go with pump stations, let's plan for it. Let's build an electrical substation nearby, because the power always goes out when you need pumps. And so those sorts of decisions are really, I think, where we're trying to take the more habitat vulnerabilities assessment approach that's been, and sort of make it a little more real for planning. And then you just start grabbing reports, and you can take your pick for levy costs. They're all expensive. Some of these are a little high to me, but this is out of a SPUR report a couple years ago, and I'm sure they took it from someone else. You start getting the flavor, and you start talking 11 or 12,000 feet, and that was just Coyote. That wasn't the rest of the inner Richardson Bay. I didn't even add that yet. So here's one for Mill Valley. I won't go into these too detailed. This is up by the Mill Valley Dog Park. So I've got a bunch of alignments here. This is the primary with no gate. This is defend the pathway at all costs, requires a gate. And then there might be one that says defend the dog park. So these are the decisions that the people, it's a very popular dog park, and I tell you, dog people are like soccer moms. I mean, they're a very, very powerful force. So the community will have to start really weighing in on where they want to pay in order to start building or protecting, or what we're going to restore and use for wave attenuation. So and that gets us to, what do engineered barriers look like? Well, these are from New Jersey, the ones they're building now. I'm sure that you guys can come up with more beautiful ones. I hope so. But cost-wise, I live in Petaluma, and along the Petaluma River, there's a lot of sheet pile that's capped. That is the flood control wall for the Petaluma River. So that's sort of the one sort of future we're heading. So now I'm going to move to something more fun, switching gears here. So one of the adaptations is everyone talks wetlands, and one type of wetland is a historic bay beaches, which were a real feature of the bay back in the day and have kind of been wiped out. So we built one as a test case, a demonstration project at a little island in Richardson Bay. You can kind of see it there. It looks like a backwards crescent wrench here in San Francisco, and then so we've got the Bay Bridge and Sausalito, and so we and we built it in 2011 and 12. And essentially, the money came from the Costco-Buscam oil spill. And what happened, these are markings of oily birds. So there was a bunch of oily birds that landed up on Aramburu, which therefore led to funding for the restoration project. Sort of, you could say the oily birds sort of greased the palms of my client, and trickled down to me as a consultant. The client was Richardson Bay Audubon Society. So they didn't know anything about beaches, they didn't know anything like that. They just knew they got the money. So we approached them, this guy, Peter Bay and myself, and said, this would be a great spot for a demonstration project. And why? Because the island's eroded. These are some aerial photos. 73 feet, this is the old island. Essentially, it's a bay mud dredged island with lag from when they built these homes. They took the hill slope and they dumped it onto the island, sort of hill slope over bay mud. 70 feet, you can see the scarping on the island. It's several feet tall. This is some of the old scarps. That's a ruler down there. The island was disappearing, and it was a bird island, so it's a perfect spot to try something, because if it fails, the birds can fly away. They don't have lawyers. So I was very excited about that. And this gives you an idea of the wind effect. It's about 7 to 8 miles, depending how far down the bay you take it. We get some good storms. I'll show you some examples. So you get, when you get the winter southern storms, which is where we get storms from the bay. In winter, it's a very, very high wave environment. This is a quick look at the plan. I know I can't go a little quicker here. We decided to build it 3 different cells. We're testing 3 different types of rock shoreline using different materials, different thicker and depending on the energy, about 1,300 feet. We did the gravel back barrier berm, I'll show you in a second, in 2011, and the sandy foreshore in 2012. And I've just finished the 2nd year monitoring, and it really looks great. So I'm very excited. You're the first people to see the monitoring results. And the idea comes from just looking at other bay beaches around. This is Outer Bear Island down in Redwood City, I believe, and you can just see that these beaches, they're nature's way of adapting to waves and wind wave energy. They move. So rather than build static walls of riprap that can't move, kind of core-like, if you have the room and you don't need that much, you can do a little nature-based approach and build with sediment that goes up and down with the waves. And that's what you're seeing here, even waves from boat waves, or storm ridges from boat waves. And then some of these concepts you'll see in Aramburu, we took just from the urban beaches you see around the bay, Robert's Landing. The wood is super important. We made up a term called micro groins, as opposed to the big Army Corps groins you see in Florida, just small rocks of complexity on the beach. And you'll see very stable beaches, holding the sand in place. So these were the design cues for the project. We did our reference site work. Was one of the ones, and we would go out there and we would survey, did a bunch of transects. I won't go into the details. This is the Pier 94, and we measured, and from that we took slopes and grain sizes and infections, and we tried to do the sort of reference work required to design our beach. And then in the bay, you spend a long time on sediment types and sizes, but we're a very diverse selection of sediments. And one in particular that's very interesting is our Holocene oyster deposits, which are, as opposed to some other areas, are very light. And there's a lot of them down in Foster City. They're actually mined for chicken feed, of all things. They grind them up and use them for chicken. So we hauled a bunch out there, and I'll show you the results of that. They're very, they're not itself going to hold off waves, but they, in conjunction with it, are a very interesting material to use in beaches. So this is the design plan. It's the lowest wave energy to the north, highest to the south. One thing that was a little problematic, but it worked well, is that we have an oblique wave angle to the island, so it tries to move the sediment along shore. We put a lot of rock and wood, mostly wood, into the shoreline when we place the, this is the sort of wave direction. And I put this in there just because in case there's an engineer, I need to show, like Dillip, really, it's slides for Dillip, that we actually did do calculations. This isn't just all just touchy-feely. There are some papers, and I put them in the MATLAB and calculated, so we didn't do any fancy modeling, but we actually did calculate something. So I'll leave that there. And then we came up with different rock sizes depending on the location, the depth, and the size for the rocks that we use. So there's some thought that went into this thing. I don't think it was all. And then just to look at some of the rock we brought in, we used a bunch of different rock sizes and some beautiful, actually beautiful metamorphic rocks. So if you ever go out there, there's really beautiful colored rocks of different sizes. And one rock type we used a lot of was waste sand and gravels from Hanson mining operations in San Francisco. This is the oyster shell. This is Pier 94, Hanson Mines, and this is a waste product to them. For us, it's gold. If you're building beaches, this is great stuff. So we grabbed as much of this as we could. They're happy to get rid of it. We're happy to use it. And this is kind of a blow up of that. And then this is some of the initial placement of the rock. More rock. I think you have to be working in the bay a long time to appreciate the joy of putting fill in the bay. You never get to do this. It's for a good cause, though. So the CDC gave us a permit. Putting in the wood structures. I'm just trying to go quickly here. And when I think about beaches too, really, the waves, is that they do the work for you. They sort, they move. I mean, you don't really have to, you're not grading it perfectly, you're just getting the right size. You can't go too big or it won't move. Then it's lag. That's what we have before, we have lag. it doesn't move often enough. So you want to make sure you don't go to your instinct to be too conservative in design. These are just some of the more examples of us putting in the micro groins. We definitely needed more wood along the shoreline than we got. Contractor didn't find it, so that's been one thing, and so we still have some movement. And this is the waves began to knock it down and work with the oyster shell and hash. This is the sandy foreshore came a year later. We managed to get some sand from a dredging operation actually in here in San Francisco. So this is us putting sand down. So now I'll show you the first people to see the monitoring photos for the few years. Very happy with this. This is pretty much post-construction, work things around, but still looking good. This is an island that was eroding like crazy. This is after you had a series of very, very big storms in March of 2013. From the south, looking that way, very large 3-foot waves, just weathered it beautifully, did exactly what we'd hoped. This is post those storms. This is from just a couple weeks ago. And interesting that the oyster shell sort of buried, but it's still there. And it's very light material, so as the materials work, it comes to the top, I think, more in the winter, and it gets the sand kind of moves up and down a little more with the normal tides in the summer. There's a lot of mud and sand right here in Richardson Bay. Oh, and then we've had great birds. I'm not a bird person, but the oyster catchers are their orange beaks and the terns with their yellow beaks, and Richardson by Audubon, who you can connect with on Facebook, and I recommend it. They post quite a bit of Aramburu slides that just gone crazy, so it's been a real bird magnet, so to speak. It's been great.